So, hello everybody, and welcome to this edition of our Introduction to Crisis Communication series. My name is Sola Abulu. I'm the principal consultant of Sola Abulu and Associates. We are a training and consulting strategy and communications firm that is focused on enabling businesses and brands to achieve their desired objectives through strategic communications, organizational effectiveness, and reputation risk management. So I'm doing this crisis communication series just as a teaser up till our communications, our issues, crisis, and reputation management course that is coming up at the end of this month, October 2024, on the 31st to be precise. You can see details of some of the links below. So I'm just going to be doing a short series of videos on intro to crisis communications in different contexts. So this one is talking about the political one. I focus a lot on business and corporate comms, but I'm also beginning to see that we need to spread out a bit more broadly. And the concept that I try to pass across in all of my videos is that strategic communications is the foundation on which 21st century world-class communications takes place. And that once you understand those principles, you can then apply it across different contexts. And I'm going to show you, I hope I'll be able to record all these videos within this month, where I can give you a teaser into how to apply the framework across different types of contexts. So if you do not know what the strategic communications framework looks like, you may take a look at some of my videos where we talk about strategic communications. I talk a lot about that. Also follow me on LinkedIn. You can see a lot of context. But if you also want to get more insights, you could also join our last training for the year, which comes up in November, the last Thursday of the month. Check our links below. Registration costs on this platform, you'll see it. Registration link on this platform, you'll see it as well. So now this is a framework that I have used. I just brought this out as at a glance view of what the strategic communication framework looks like. So let's run through it and see how it plays out in a political context. So we're talking about crisis communication. So we're imagining right now there's a political crisis, maybe, I don't know, it could be anything. It could be for a political leader of some sort, maybe something around the elections or even campaigns or whatever it is. So you start off with, first of all, the context. Everybody that attends my strategic communications training, I always say this. You start off from what is the overarching context? What is the context? It's important to say that, because if you don't do that, you make assumptions. Even the person who is at the heart of the crisis, either the political leader, whether you're a government leader, you're a president, you're a state governor, or you're a candidate for election, or whatever it may be, or some policymaker of some sort, if you don't sit down and have a brainstorming conversation about what the nature of the problem is, you may not even see that there's a problem. As far as I'm concerned, you're like, oh, it's just some people saying some stuff on the media. It's nothing for me to be worried about. But people who are listening and are watching, the stakeholders who are concerned and are observing and hearing the sentiment, most of which may not come to you directly, except you're reading it in the papers and it's front page news, they should also be in that conversation as what exactly are we dealing with? That's the first thing. And when you do this nature of the problem, you ask from the perspective of the external, not just from your own feeling, like I said, because if you're thinking about just the way you're looking at it, you're going to miss it. Now, in the political space, particularly in political leadership, I notice that they miss it a lot here, because many of the times they overlook a lot of things. They are very quick to undermine and say, oh, it's just these rabble rousers, oh, it's this guy's just doing this, oh, pay them no mind, pay no attention, until they realize that it's an issue. It's more than an issue. It's coming like a mini crisis for them. But there are many points at which they could have picked it up if they were not so dismissive of what it was like. So find out what the main issue is from the external perspective. That's number one. So crisis communication is not about how you feel, not about what you think. It's about what's going on out there. And I wouldn't say more than that, because there's a limit to what we can say within the time we have. Then you ask yourself, who are the people that are active in this space? So whatever it is that that has now come to your attention and is making you get a little bit agitated, or getting stakeholders around you agitated, who are the people behind it? Who are those that have high interest and high influence in this issue? Many times, particularly in the political space, they may be known stakeholders. Many times they may be emerging stakeholders. In these days of social media activism and civil society activism and citizen activism, and people just getting more interested in what's going on in politics, because when the cost of living is rising, then everybody's going to get interested in, how are we spending our money, what's going on. So who are the voices that are beginning to exert themselves in this space? And who is exerting the most positive influence? Who is exerting the most negative influence? Who are the advocates? Who are the allies? And who are the antagonists? What are their interests and concerns? You need to do that stakeholder analysis. Here also should be a little bit about the audience analysis, but I left that out because I'm focusing now on the stakeholders. But ideally, this bucket should show stakeholders and audience. Now, I want to also be clear that everything I'm sharing here is just a teaser. So if you're doing it in real life, it's going to be much more intense than this. But it's important that I'm using this as a teaser to show you the kind of thinking, the kind of questions, and the sequence. In strategic communications, you move from point A onwards. You don't start from the back and start walking back. It's always a problem. And a lot of what we're sharing here, I recognize that, for me, I'm based in Nigeria, in Africa, and there are a lot of people that very much hold on to the traditional way of doing things, and they think it will continue to work. But I am here to tell you that even though you think it's working for you now, it's going to become less effective as you go along at some point, whether we like it or not. You will have to embrace the shift in how modern communications is done. And I think a lot of our political leaders are beginning to realize this because they have to engage more with audiences and stakeholders that probably before they would dismiss. They find out that they're not able to own and control the narrative as they used to do in the past. Because right now, the media landscape has changed. In fact, that ideally should have been how we started this conversation if we're going into a real training session, because you have to first understand how the media landscape is changing, how people are, the difference between how people are using media and the options available for people, how they hear information, how they believe it, how they form opinions, and how they act, how mass movements are actually created before you can begin to understand how you now play it in the 21st century reality, recognizing that social media information travels at the speed of light and it's in everybody's hands right now. So then you ask yourself, with everything that is going on, I mean, you've done your step one, political context analysis, stakeholder and audience analysis. You now ask yourself, what does success look like? What do I want people to know? So maybe there's some narrative out there, something going on about me or political candidate or whoever. What do I want them to know about? What does the candidate want them to know about him or her, or the leader want them to know? How does that person want them to feel? Now, in political context, particularly in my part of the world, I also observe that they ignore this feeling part, this emotional part. They really, really, and it gets me. They really ignore that part, and they forget that that is the area in which you win or lose the people. It's not so much in the knowledge area. It is not so much in the action area, but in that feeling. If you lose them here, you've lost them anywhere, everywhere. Even if you lose them in the knowledge area, it's bad, but it can be salvaged if they still believe, in their hearts that your heart is in the right place. But if you lose them, even if you do the right things and, in terms of action and everything, this feeling is what, that affinity, that sense of commitment, support, you can only get it when people feel like you hear them and you see them. So I think that, the way strategic communications, the strategic way of doing things is you find out, you ask yourself, what does success look like in terms of what I want the stakeholders, the people to know? What do I want? How do I want them to feel about me or about this issue or about my role in this issue? And what would I like them to do? Of course, if it's in the election context, you're talking about campaigns. If it's in the post-election process and there's some controversy, you want their support, that kind of thing, write all of it down. And like I said, do it for audiences as well as stakeholders. Again, another mistake that I see that political players make and their handlers, including political communicators, is that they focus a lot on the people who can actually do, shape the outcome. So they're focusing on, let's say people with a former political position or an electoral position or a judicial position, and by and large, they're ignoring the audience. They focus on the political players. They don't focus on the citizens. They ignore the citizens by and large. Like I said, in the kind of systems that a lot of us operate in my part of the world, that may seem to have been working up till now, but I believe, and all of the trends point to the fact that it's going to become less and less effective as time goes on, as citizens become more engaged, more involved, more participatory in the process, and begin to demand a certain level of accountability from their leaders. It's going to happen because the cost of living is rising, and people are going to be, they're just going to continue asking questions. So it's not business as usual. In those days, people could avoid or could ignore what was going on in government or in politics because they didn't feel that it impacted on them anyway. But right now, I think there's a growing awareness of that. And we're beginning to see that more questions, leaders being asked, and just a whole lot more scrutiny than there used to be before. And of course, the political reaction to that is, oh, we need to crack down on social media. And then you can't, because even the government needs social media to be able to communicate with the citizens, particularly when you're talking about millions of people that you need to reach at the same time. So there's the opportunity space in it, but so far, a lot of political players, particularly those with official political positions, have not been able to leverage it to the extent that they would like to, because they like to, think about it as something that they can control rather than something that you should leverage on. It's not about control, it's about leveraging on it. So the next thing, therefore, is to look at what narrative and sentiment. What's the narrative? Again, actually, I wanted to separate narrative from sentiment, but, well, I needed space on this slide, so I put them in one. But in actual fact, I would say that you should actually So you look at what is the prevailing narrative. Like I said, the narrative and the sentiment are very, very important because it's what exactly are people saying about you in that situation, or about the group, the or the organization, the institution, whatever it is. What exactly it is that people are saying, and how far is it from the truth, and what kind of a shift would you like to see? Now, I want to spend some time talking about this because I think in the political space particularly, I think the level of our political discourse, a lot of the time, people think that facts are immaterial. The most important thing is for me to just get positive press. So, and that's not a right way to, it's not an ethical way, it's not right, and it's not sustainable, because at the end of the day, people will eventually find out when you have misrepresented things. I mean, just a few days ago, there was a speech that was read by a political leader in my part of the world. And immediately after the speech, a lot of people said that a lot of things that were said were factually incorrect. And for me, I just marvel at, is it just to say something and at the end of the day, everybody knows that what you said was not true? And then you go about your business and you're happy that you gave a speech, regardless of how people feel about it. And everybody sees you as a liar. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're a liar. So for me, I don't see that as a sustainable way of practice, because at the end of the day, you are eroding the trust of the people. And that's why the trust in political players and government around the world, but more in some parts of the world than in others, is really declining. And when you need that goodwill, you don't have it. You only have it with the people that are, maybe your direct beneficiaries, your family members, those kind of things. But from the larger citizenry, you do not have the support that you need. And every leader needs the support of followers. So I would always advocate that political communicators help to use communications to bridge gap between the political players and the people that they are leading, not just their allies and their parties. But if you have a political position, for instance, then everybody that you are supposed to serve, either in the process of that governance process or whatever it may be, you need to find a way to also bridge the gap with them. Of course, you may have some people that are closer to you in terms of their ideology and all of that. But if you have a political public role, you have been nominated or elected into a position or selected as it may be, you have a responsibility to bridge the gap with everybody that is under your remit, either as citizens of the population or citizens of the state or the national government or whatever. So you have to address that narrative and the sentiment. And for instance, if people feel, no matter what it is you're doing, I hear a lot of political players saying, oh, but we're doing a lot, the people just don't know. And, for me, it's a very, I don't know, there's just a problem there. So clearly, you're not, it's either you are doing things that are not, for instance, if you are doing the will of the IMF and the World Bank, but it's not impacting on the people, then don't expect the people to be clapping, on for you because of what you did to the World Bank. So yes, you've made some stakeholders very happy. They're indeed very happy with you. But if you had done your stakeholder mapping, you would know that I made one stakeholder group happy does not mean that it will translate to the other one. So making your creditors happy and your international multilateral organizations happy with the actions they're taking does not translate into the citizens being happy. And that's what strategic communications approach to a financial or an economic crisis should factor in. You should think about the different stakeholders, what they want, what they need from you, and how you can address it. So again, and then the know, feel, and do also requires you to do something. So there's some things that you may need to do as the political leader or the political player to be able to earn that trust. And those are the kind of things that you then do. So you actually take action on some things, and then you think about how you're going to, the kind of narrative you want to shift it to. So if they think, oh, I am not up to this job, or this political leader is not up to this job, is not competent enough, I want them to shift from where they are to, this is the right person for the job. Everything that they're doing is in the interest of the population and the citizenry. But then these are the proof points, and these are the things that I need, or these are the things that I need to do for the audiences, for the stakeholders, for the citizens, that they may now know and agree with me that we are really doing the right thing. And you have to make sure that you are addressing the sentiment as well as the narrative and the issues that are being raised. So actually, it's the issues, the narrative, and sentiment. I think there should have been somewhere where, yeah, okay, there's issues. What is the main issue exactly? So if you have, I should actually have issues and stakeholders written here, because it's really about issues and stakeholder. What exactly is the issue? That has to be very clear. That then you go into your messaging strategy. So when you've done all of this, what is it that you're going to do? What are the actions that you are going to take? And then what is your messaging strategy? Where are you going to speak to the people about this? And let's see. So like I was saying, I actually just paused this a bit to add this about the action. So we're asking, what is the prevailing narrative? So we talked about that. How far from the truth is it? What kind of a shift would you like to see? Then what action do we need to take? In politics, there's always an action that you need to take. It's not like, in fact, everything in a crisis, actually, crisis communications generally, there's always an action that needs to be taken. It's not just going out and sometimes it may be, that something that was said that was not true. So in which case, you don't even need to take any action other than to go out and debunk it and say it was a lie, and then provide some evidence to buttress what you're saying. That's actually very important. But sometimes there may be some actions that you need to take. In other words, maybe there was an accusation that like a political leader who was supposed to have done something, he didn't do that, or something that is not being done, or they raised an issue around some sort of gap in governance or whatever. So whatever that thing is, or there was an emergency of sorts and they believe that the response of the government should have been better and stronger. So, you give the commands, you do all of that, and then you decide what needs to be done to close that gap. Because if really there was something you should have done as a political leader and you did not do, you had better address it, or at least you had better address it or start taking steps to address it before going out and telling people. Don't just go out and respond. Go and respond with facts that I have been in contact, I have placed a call, I have contacted, we have sent this, we have done that, and all of that. And you make sure that becomes part of your messaging. Again, crisis communications, depending on how intense whatever it is, you have to respond same day. I always say, I don't care what time of the day it is, respond same day, except if it broke at 2 a.m., then you have an excuse for waiting. In fact, 2 a.m., same day, 5 a.m., 12 midnight, yes, perhaps you have an excuse, but even at that, crisis is 24/7, which is why you must have a crisis communication structure set up ever before you set up. And if you are a candidate, you are going for anything, I assume that you would have a crisis communication structure in place before you go through an elections process, because otherwise you are not going to be able to activate, particularly in my part of the world. You have to plan for crisis, and that includes your communications as well. And I need to make a point that communications that is set up for promotion is not the same as communication set up for crisis. And if you do not have a crisis communication set up and trained before time, they will not be able to pivot. They will not be able to pivot because they were only trained in the promotional way. I need to make this a very good point to make at this point now, because a lot of us, we are, particularly if you're a PR person, you can't pivot to crisis. It's a different skill set. So most of us have to go through training to understand how to respond in a crisis. And the structure for crisis response is different. When you train everybody. In a separate video on my course as well, we actually talk about some of the skills and expertise that are required to set up a communications support team. In my former place of work, we used to have a full day training for those people involved in crisis supports. Crisis comms teams used to be trained. And these are people who are already trained practitioners in their day-to-day job. But the training for crisis communications is different from your normal steady state communications. It's just like if you're a medical officer and you are a first responder emergency, how you would operate in a normal patient comes in and reports is different from emergency. Emergency, there's an urgency, the patient is about, do you understand? The patient's life is at risk. So you find out the people that are in the emergency response skills, they are trained because everything, knowing who to contact, what to do, how, having that rigor, and the team must already be trained to hand. Otherwise, they will not handle it. You see that there's a difference between how emergencies are handled in hospitals and how normal walk-ins or the registration. They are two separate processes, but it's all within the hospital, but the trainings and the arrangement, the structure is different. That's exactly how it is for crisis communication. So in the political context, you should have your promotional people, but also have your crisis communications structure. And I would always advocate that, particularly depending on the high stakes level of it as a political leader, you should have them as two separate teams working integrated with a communications lead supporting them. So that you don't pull people out from the people who are doing the normal promotional everyday, okay, we're commissioning this and that. Don't pull them off, so that they still have to do that, whatever the case is. But then the crisis team has to be ready to go. So you just have a way of doing it. So maybe some people come from here to there, but then they should be able to run complementary to one another. That's the point. So then you decide what your messaging strategy is. What am I going to say? where are we going to say it, and what is the content strategy? In other words, how many platforms are we going to be in? How are we going to, is it videos we're going to use? Is it going to be infographics? What's the role of data, images, all of that? You need to have that conversation, because sometimes, again, like I said this in another video somewhere, we focus too much on the tell. We should be doing tell and show. Modern day communication is about tell and show. People want to see evidence. So show data, and people remember what they see. They may not remember what they hear, but they always remember what they see. So use visual communications as much as possible. Then think about your engagement strategy. Who's going to speak? Which voices? Some things are better addressed by the leader, the candidate. Some things are better addressed by the leader or the candidates plus other voices. Think about it very intuitively. And I think sometimes, like I would say, the political leaders in my part of the world, in my country, Nigeria, I think they do that a lot. They use a lot of voices. The president, for instance, doesn't speak that much, but he uses, there are a lot of people out there really doing that for him. Unfortunately, I think so. I think they get it in terms of, the spokespersons. I think they don't get it where in my view, I think they miss it a lot is in terms of the narrative and the sentiment. And they seem to, the content of their messaging seems to play more to their allies, and does not, it doesn't really address the middle ground, the people who just want to hear what's really going on. And I think there's too much emphasis on propaganda as opposed to facts. And, just there's so much focus on just coming out positive without really addressing the issues, which is not really crisis management. It's not effective crisis communications or crisis management. So they're forever, snowballing from one issue to the other. But I digress. So again, your proof points must be excellent. So how are you going to engage? Are you going to do TV, radio? I remember the president of Kenya recently opened Twitter, had a Twitter space with some of his Gen Z, because he could see that those are the people that he needed to speak with. So you need to take that kind of view in terms of how you de-escalate and how you manage the crisis. And then your metrics, again, your metrics will be determined by what you had desired, you had said success should be. So how do you monitor the conversation? If the shifts that you said you wanted to see is, I want a shift in the narrative. So that's about what people are saying, what's being reported, what people are saying, the conversation on social media and off social and offline as well. Then how do you monitor that conversation? How do you know that that shift has taken place? How do you know that there's a shift in perception, sentiment, media mention? Media mention you can easily monitor, but sentiment, that may take some doing, because we need to monitor it through conversations offline and checking with some people who are opinion formers out there. But everything depends on how your framing of the issue in this place is what will then determine what you're measuring, and how you will know if you have really become successful, or you're just thinking, just because my friends and my allies are saying that I've done well, that means that I've done well. So that's the introduction to crisis communications in the political context in a nutshell. Thank you very much for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share as well. And see you on the next video, and hopefully on our course on crisis management and communication, issues, crisis, and reputation management on the 31st of October online. See details for registration below. Thank you so much, and take care.